A man gets crushed by a 10,000-pound truck, dies on the spot. Another guy stabbed himself 17 times and died. A lady had internal bleeding during her pregnancy, and she died. What do these people have in common? They all died. They all came back. And they all tell stories that no drug, no dream, and no DMT trip comes close to matching. If any of this is even partly true, then dying might be the least scary part of what comes next. This video is going to take you through the most mind-bending near-death experiences ever recorded. Some are comforting, some are downright disturbing, but all of them raise the same question. If this is what dying feels like, then what really is death? It's one thing to brush up against death and feel yourself drifting out of your body. But to go through it twice? That's just insane. Peggy Robinson's first encounter with death wasn't anything poetic or dreamy. It was muddy, silent. The kind of silence that only a 5-year-old drowning alone in a pond can understand. No screaming or flailing, just brown water and that awful realization that no one was coming. Without anyone knowing, her brother had taken the board she was floating on and swum away. Her mom and sister were at the house, busy packing up their picnic. Alone in the water, helpless and forgotten, Peggy sank. Now here's where things start to wobble.
I'm scared, I'm screaming. Then all of a sudden, I'm at the ceiling of the kitchen. And I'm looking down, and I see my mom and my sister. They're slowly getting things out of the cabinet to bring down, like for a picnic. And I feel their emotions. I don't hear anything like earthly, worldly. I'm just sensing, feeling their mood and their emotions. And then I'm back in the water, and I'm continually struggling. So I think my soul must have left my body for a moment and come back. But now my throat hurts so bad, it feels like it's going to burst wide open, and I can't take it anymore. But then it's like that calm feeling you have when you wake up from a nap. That relaxed feeling like everything's fine with the world. And I thought at 5 years old, thinking, my parents lied to me. There's no such thing as drowning. What was I afraid of? Because I'm not struggling to breathe. I can breathe. I'm fine. And the water's no longer that dark, scary, muddy brown where I couldn't see. It's now a bright white, transparent green. So I think, oh, okay, this is cool. I can't wait to tell my older siblings. There's no such thing as drowning. Then I'm sinking down below, which before would have terrified me. And the fish are bumping into me. And I'm just going off like driftwood.
What she did not know was that at this moment, she had died. She drifted to the bottom and just stayed. To her, it felt peaceful, and she could see the world from 2 angles at once, like her vision split, above and below the water. Then she floated higher, rising above the pond, past the trees. Still just a kid, but now bodiless, floating like a ghost. And just when she figured she was free to explore, a voice said, "No, don't go yet. If they find you soon, you might go back." Might. It's such a weird word when you're dead. She doesn't remember being pulled from the pond. One moment she was with the voice. The next, she was dangling off her brother's shoulder, vomiting water down his back. To the adults, it was just a close call. She was lucky, no need to dwell. And for years, even Peggy questioned what she'd experienced. Maybe it had been a dream, something her brain conjured while starved of oxygen. She tried to let go of the experience and chalked it up to hallucination. But then, at 25, the same thing happened. This time she was pregnant with twins. And on that particular day, she knew something was wrong with her pregnancy. It turns out she was bleeding internally, causing her great pain. The pain was so much that she collapsed. By the time help arrived and she was at the hospital, she was dead. And then, bam, she had an out-of-body experience. This time, no pond, no fish, just space. She was speeding through some kind of tunnel, like riding a loud cosmic rope, bumping around in the dark, and then suddenly, silence. She was alone, but she was not scared. And then she saw them, figures, outlines in the brightness, one sitting in the center. Peggy says she just knew instinctively. That's God. Immediately, like as if she rehearsed it before, she started yelling, "I'm not staying. I can't stay. I have kids to raise. I'm not leaving them." She started pouring it all out. Every bit of abuse, every injustice, every heartbreak. And she says God just let her. Listened. Understood. So she made a deal. If my boys would be better off without me, fine. But if not, please let me go back. She was then shown a vision. Her sons sitting inside their trailer, talking about her. And her middle child, Jeremy, saying he wanted her back. Not someday, right now. Peggy says that it hit her so hard she physically recoiled. Then she found herself back in the light, judging herself, blaming herself for dying, for her twins dying, for leaving her boys motherless. And then she was back, in her body, sitting in a wheelchair in the hospital, like nothing had happened. Except everything had. The nausea was gone. No pain, no sign of the blood pouring into her abdomen. The doctor said she was fine, but Peggy knew it was not. She knew her body had lied. That night, the pain returned, this time sharp and slicing through her hip. She kept passing out, vomiting, and praying for the morning to come so the doctor would believe her. The ultrasound the next day was a horror show. It showed internal bleeding. She was told to sign organ donor papers. The twins couldn't be saved. But here's where it gets a lot more interesting. After the second near-death experience, weird things started happening. Psychic things. She'd hear babies crying when no one else could. One day at a family reunion, she says she followed the sound and found a toddler face down in a ditch, barely breathing. She'd get feelings. Pull over now. Go to that house. Check on that kid. And every time someone needed help, a child choking, a car wreck, a near drowning, she was drawn to it. Like some radar got switched on. Her own son, Jeremy, nearly drowned once. She prayed hard, told him in her mind to calm down and stand up. Later, he told her he heard her underwater. And even crazier, he said he was hovering over her while she prayed, like a drone, watching her, just like she'd hovered over her mom and sister back when she was 5. Peggy didn't talk about a lot of these for a long time. Thought people would call her crazy. She was a social worker, a counselor, a grounded woman with bills and responsibilities. Telling people you've been to the edge of death, and back twice, wasn't exactly a resume booster. But one day she saw others talking about their near-death experience on Oprah, and something cracked open. She realized her stories had to be told, even the hard ones, even if people rolled their eyes. Because maybe, just maybe, what she saw, what she felt, what she knew, were all real. And now she keeps sharing her story.
Hold it in and hide it like I did. And be ashamed for no reason. Just because people won't believe you is no reason to be ashamed. I want people to be like I am now. Speak your truth, because there's a science here that we need to start learning about. Like the true nature of reality. People say that stuff can't be true. You can't be out of your body during an NDE. You couldn't have been told this. You couldn't have this or that. Well, there's millions of us. It's happening. And I think there's something we're not tapping into. That if we knew what this was and learned the secrets, I think the world would be a beautiful place.
Peggy went on to write a book called The Will of a Wildflower, a memoir that pulled no punches. Raw, honest, and strange in the best way. Then, she launched NDE TV, a YouTube channel that talks about others who've had near-death experiences. Different stories, all with the same thread. And when you hear them lined up like that, back to back, you start to wonder if they're all tapping into something real, something we're not supposed to forget. You ever meet someone who's so confidently atheist they'd argue with a priest just for sport? That was Brian Melvin. He wasn't just skeptical, he was militant about it. Religion to him was a joke. And if there was a God, he said, he was either blind, cruel, or criminal. Brian was 19, living in Tucson, Arizona, selling drugs to church kids and baiting Christians for fun. He says he wore that mockery like a badge of honor, until one day when he drank some contaminated water. Cholera hit fast and brutally. His body spiraled into dehydration, organ failure, and what doctors quietly expected next was death. He collapsed alone in his house, gasping, and then just still. That's where it starts to go strange. Brian says the pain vanished, completely gone, and this eerie peace slid in like it had been waiting. He floated above his body, and even though he was nearly blind in real life, he could suddenly see everything in sharp detail, down to the cooler on his roof, which he later confirmed had a broken corner he couldn't have known about. He says the moment he left his body, every trace of atheism fell away. Not because he wanted it to, because it just didn't fit anymore. He found himself drifting through a kind of dark space. Not scary, not hostile, just quiet, like the room right before a concert starts. Then light, music, but not any music he'd ever heard. This was choral, layered, and sung in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. Then came the review. Not a life flashing before his eyes moment, but curated snapshots. Him lying, manipulating, mocking, twisting love into power plays. He watched the moments where he should have died and realized something had been pulling strings to keep him alive. That didn't scare him. What scared him was where he was going next. He saw a figure on a rock suspended in what looked like infinite space. Light poured from this being. Brian says he knew instantly who it was. Jesus. He collapsed, couldn't even stand. And here's the part that really messed with him. Jesus didn't need to say a word. Every thought Brian had, every emotion, every excuse, none of it mattered. It was like being x-rayed by love, but love that wasn't letting anything slide, not even the stuff he'd buried. He says he noticed the scars on Jesus, the wrists, the feet, and somehow he felt like he was the reason they were there. The guilt was crushing. He says it hit him that if he were allowed into heaven the way he was, he'd poison it. And that's when he knew he didn't deserve paradise. He deserved the other place. So Jesus gave him an option. Not a demand, not a threat, just a choice. Do you want to go back, or do you need to see the rest? Brian picked C. The next part gets ugly. He was pulled down into what he describes as a vortex, hot, foul, and screaming. You know that part in dreams where the floor disappears and you fall? That, but it didn't stop. He landed in what looked like a perfect little country house on a hill. People came out to greet him, smiling. One said she was his grandma. Another said he was an old friend. They told him he'd made it. This was paradise. For about 30 seconds, he bought it. Then he spotted a guy he knew, a guy who died violently, and realized, no way this guy made it to heaven. He started questioning them. That's when it turned. Their eyes went reptilian. They circled him, faces changed, smiles twisted. He started yelling, "Jesus Christ," over and over, fast like a chant. And that's when the masks dropped completely. What he saw, he says, didn't belong in horror films. It belonged in ancient myth. Reptilian things, amphibians with rotting breath, gargoyles with no wings.
What I saw. On their road, there were these hellish beings, and they were various heights and sizes and shapes. The taller ones had more power over the smaller ones. And so, like I said, they were escorting people. They were going around. And so Lizard Breath, who I called that, started talking to me. And I could never really get an accurate picture of him because his breath was so foul, it would distort his face. So I could never tell you how many eyes he had. Couldn't tell you he had 1, 2, 3, or 4. It looked like multiple eyes because his breath was so foul, it was just distorting his face. And he looked like a little reptilian dinosaur, best I can put it. And I later found a picture.
Hell, Brian says, is laid out like a spiral staircase. Bricks made of prison cells. A bottomless pit at the center. Each level is a deeper layer of who someone really was. It wasn't just punishment. It was exposure. People reaping exactly what they'd sown. And the more time passed, the more of their core was revealed. He saw a professor forced to endlessly scribble lies on a chalkboard, a fake preacher running on a treadmill, beaten by demons disguised as his congregation, a witch buried in a coffin, scratching, a man trapped in a loop of childhood trauma and adult cruelty. Women who toyed with emotions were toyed with in return. Mockers were mocked, manipulators were manipulated. All of it tailor-made, not by God, but by their own actions, twisted back on them. And then, Hitler. Not symbolic Hitler, the actual man, as he looked in 1945.
Entities around and all this stuff. We came to this one particular cell and we stopped. I looked inside of it, and it was like the inside of a furnace. And in it was Adolf Hitler. You can't mistake him. He was like going through each person for however long it takes to cremate somebody or gas them. He was going through that over and over and over and over and over again. And then suddenly, and that'll probably change in a few billion years, and it'll probably be something far worse later on. And that's what he was doing. I just saw him at that point burning in there, and yet flesh would be consumed in flames and burn off and come back on his skin. I can't explain it. And he would feel the pain, and yet he was getting violently angry. The vile hate that he had. And people don't realize he was involved in heavy duty.
Eventually, Brian was led to a bigger cell, empty, but waiting. A dentist's chair, but alive. He says he knew this was his spot, what he'd earned, what he couldn't escape. He felt a suction from the floor, worms with teeth, moths with faces, whispering curses. His voice was almost gone. He could barely get the words out. Jesus Christ. And then silence. Everything around him bolted, like animals scattering from a wildfire. Something stronger had entered. Brian says he didn't need to see. He knew. Jesus showed up, picked him up like a kid. Brian cried into his shoulder, said he didn't deserve this. Jesus didn't argue, he just carried him out. On the way back, Brian says he saw the walls of hell. Beyond them, something worse, a lake of fire, getting hotter. He knew that eventually hell would be tossed into it, like a garbage bin finally taken out. Then he was back on the rock. One last breath. Jesus blew on him, and Brian was sucked back through the void, feet first. The music played again, just for a second. Then everything hurt. His lungs were choking. He was alive. Back in his house, his neighbor found him. The hospital ride was chaos. He flatlined a few more times. When Melvin came to in the hospital, the doctors were stunned. He had been clinically dead. And yet he spoke of having witnessed hell's inner workings and its most infamous prisoner. The memory, he claims, left him shaken to his core. He emerged from the experience transformed, no longer militant or atheist, profoundly changed by what he believed he saw and by how terrifying and vividly real it had felt. Bruce Van Natta. You know how some people say you can feel it coming? Bruce Van Natta didn't. November 16th, 2006 was just another workday, elbow deep in a Peterbilt logging truck that had already eaten 3 days of his time. Bruce was a diesel mechanic, the kind of guy who could bring an 18-wheeler back from the dead. But this time, it wasn't the truck that needed saving. His buddy Leonard, the truck's owner, asked him for one last favor: figure out an oil leak nobody could trace. Thing is, Leonard had already jacked the whole front end of the truck up on a 20-ton bottle jack. No safety blocks, no stands. Bruce noticed. He still slid under, head last, lying on a plastic creeper. The axle was just a couple of inches above his gut. Leonard climbed into the truck to shut off the engine. That's all it took. The truck shifted, the jack popped, and 12,000 pounds of steel slammed down across Bruce's abdomen.
Truck fell through the middle of my body, basically like a blunt guillotine, like maybe 6 inches deep or wide. When it fell through the middle, on impact, blood shot out of my mouth instantly. It was on impact. The truck fell through me, and on that impact, the blood shot out of my mouth, and I saw the blood That's what I saw, the blood on the cement, and realizing that it came out of me from the inside out. And then there's that realization that this truck just fell on me. And it was even before the pain hit. Well, just like that realization. And I see the blood shoot out. And then at that point, I just called out and I said, oh, Lord, help me. When I say
Everything from his liver to his spleen ruptured, his spine cracked, his body was now as thick as a paperback. And the worst part? He was alive for it. The pain was so immense, he couldn't breathe. His lungs had collapsed. His arteries were shredded. He knew he was dying. So he screamed for God. Then something snapped. The moment his heart stopped, Bruce says his spirit floated up. He found himself near the ceiling, 14 feet above the carnage, watching it all. The screaming. The blood. Leonard sobbing on his knees. But Bruce didn't feel fear, no pain, just absolute eerie peace. Here's where it gets wild. Besides Leonard, Bruce says there were 2 massive angels over 8 feet tall, kneeling on either side of his body like human bookends, glowing, muscular, calm, arms under the truck, somehow keeping Bruce alive. They didn't seem strange to him up there. They felt normal, but once he came back, he couldn't see them with what he calls his earth eyes. Meanwhile, an EMT named Shannon ran in. She slapped his face, yelling his name over and over. The thing was, Bruce didn't recognize it. He just knew he was being called. He says his spirit re-entered his body like it got sucked in from the top of his head. No defibrillator, no CPR. Just boom. Heartbeat again. And with it, a tidal wave of pain. He screamed, said he didn't want to be there. The second he made that choice, his heart stopped again. Back to the ceiling. Then the tunnel opened. He calls it a long, blinding chute at a 45-degree angle, like it stretched for 1,000,000 miles. At the end was light. Warm, overwhelming light. He knew Jesus was there. He could feel it. And he took off down that tunnel like a rocket. But halfway through, Shannon's voice yanked him back. Again. Back in his body. Second restart. More pain. Worse than before. A loud, ugly voice told him to give up. Die already. But then a whisper, a calm, direct whisper said, "If you want to live, you're going to have to fight. It's going to be a hard fight." Bruce weighed his options. Peace or pain? He chose peace. 3rd cardiac arrest, 3rd trip up, same tunnel, same pullback. But this time, when he returned, he remembered his family, 4 kids, his wife. All of it came rushing in. That's when it shifted. He wanted to stay. Not for himself, for them. He was med-flighted to the trauma center. Should have died en route. His arteries were severed in 5 places. Doctors gave him 18 units of blood. More than a human body holds. They told his wife to cross her fingers. She prayed instead. 5 surgeries followed. He spent weeks in a coma. When he finally came to, he tried to speak but couldn't. Couldn't write either. Too much brain damage from the oxygen loss. But when the breathing tube came out, first words, angels. He had to get it out. Most of his small intestine was gone. He had less than a meter left. That's starvation territory. He was wasting away, down 65 pounds, skin and bones. Doctors said he'd be dead in 6 months. Then a man named Bruce Carlson showed up. Said God told him to come. Put his hand on Bruce's forehead and prayed for his intestines to grow. Bruce says it felt like electricity, like something uncoiled inside him. Months later, imaging showed he now had over 2 meters of small intestine. Adult intestines don't regrow. They just don't. So yeah, Bruce has chronic pain, some digestion issues, but he's alive. And since then, he's dedicated himself to full-time ministry, traveling, telling his story, talking about those angels, about the tunnel, about the choice to fight. He later founded Sweetbread Ministries and wrote a book titled Saved by Angels. Just when you think you've heard the wildest near-death story, this next one throws out the rulebook, sets it on fire, and rewrites everything you thought you knew about life and death. Vincent Tolman was 25, big into bodybuilding, and pretty optimistic about the world until he took a supplement that, in hindsight, really should have come with a skull and crossbones. It was called Furon Dehydro, imported. Supposed to be a more hardcore version of the American kind. Turns out it was 20 times stronger and full of stuff that would make a lab rat lawyer up. He and a friend tried it together. Minutes later, they were both doubled over. Nausea. Dizziness. Vincent barely stumbled into a restaurant bathroom before collapsing. He vomited, gasped, and went limp. And then, he died. No heartbeat, no breath. His body lay there cooling for 30 to 45 minutes, long enough to start turning stiff. Paramedics found no pulse. They zipped him into a bright yellow body bag, sealing it shut. That's certainly not how you treat someone who might still be alive. That's how you pack a corpse. And here's where it veers straight into Twilight Zone territory. Vincent says he was fully conscious during all of it, but not in his body. He was somewhere else, watching it play out like a movie. He said it was like sitting in a theater seat, watching a scene of some guy sprawled out on a grimy bathroom floor. Only it was him. He just didn't know it yet. According to him, he could hear the thoughts of the restaurant staff, the patrons, and even the paramedics. Like audio commentary, but unfiltered. He said the whole thing felt strangely directed, almost like a student film. When the medics lifted his body into the ambulance, he noticed one rookie EMT who was clearly rattled, beating himself up inside for not trying harder. While the pros had written Vincent off, this kid wasn't so sure. Then, something seriously weird happened.
That was enough for him. He decided he was going to attempt resuscitation. So
now this rookie is supposed to follow protocol, but instead, he unzips the bag, feels around the neck. Nothing. Arm? Nothing. Then he goes deep into Vincent's thigh, pressing so hard he hits bone. That's when it happened. Vincent describes a jolt, like an ignition, an electrical pop, and at the same time, the rookie jumps. It wasn't a pulse, not yet, but it was enough. The rookie goes full ER mode, defibrillator, bagging air, chest compressions, one heartbeat, then another, and then a pulse. The other medics whip around. Suddenly, they're making calls like it's a live case again. They were headed for the morgue. Now they're racing to a hospital. Inside the trauma room, Tolman's body started seizing, vomiting. The medical team move in to restrain his limbs, and when they tightened the strap on his left arm, he felt it. Not in a metaphorical way. He actually felt the strap on his body. That's when he realized this wasn't a movie. He was watching his own death. Then came the worst part, the life review. He says he saw every awful thing he'd ever done, but not just from his view, through the eyes of the people he'd hurt. Stuff he didn't even remember, even from when he was a little kid. No excuses, no justifications, just truth. And it hit hard. A dark presence crept in. He said it felt like his light was being snuffed out, like fear itself had a gravity. But then, something shifted. A warmth from behind him. Light. A feeling like standing in the sun after years of winter. He turned toward it. And that's when things got really strange. There was a man. White beard, long white hair, pink skin, looked mid-30s. Tolman thought, okay, this has to be God, or maybe Jesus. The man laughed and said, "No, son, I'm not God, and I'm not Jesus either." He introduced himself as Drake, said he was there to guide him, either back to Earth or forward to whatever comes next. Vincent looked back at the hospital room, his body in agony, machines beeping, nurses rushing, and yeah, he was out. He chose to leave. Drake explained things in ways Vincent couldn't forget, even if he wanted to. According to this Drake, Earth isn't a courtroom. It's a school. We're not here to be judged. We're here to learn. Love is the curriculum. The more we give, the more we understand it. The more we understand it, the closer we get to what's real. He said heaven isn't somewhere you earn, it's where you come from. But to get back, You've got to raise your frequency. Your love energy, as he called it. Every grudge, every ounce of hatred or victimhood, it drags your signal down. Then he watched a soul, an old man from the 1900s, finally let go of a century-long grudge against his son. And as soon as he did, angels surrounded him. Gone. Into the light. Then Vincent stepped into heaven. He says this place didn't just shine, it glowed from within. The grass had its own music. The water healed. Even the air tasted sweet. The whole place hummed with presence. No time, no sun. Just pure, radiant being. Drake hugged him. Apparently, hugs in heaven fuse energy like yin and yang. Vincent said it felt so much stronger than anything on earth. He met souls from every religion. All of them were there because they'd lived with love. Not doctrine, not dogma, just love. And then something tugged. A prayer from his brother, back on earth. Overflowing with love. It hit like a wave and pulled him out. Suddenly, he's awake, in the hospital. Tubes everywhere, covered in blood. And the first thing he wants to do is leave. He unhooks himself, alarms blaring, and walks out. Nurses freak out. He signs a bunch of papers saying they're not liable if he keels over in the parking lot. His dad picks him up. And that's when it hits him. Coming back felt worse than dying. It wasn't some triumphant return. It was grief, like being ripped from home and thrown into a noise machine. He wanted to go back so badly that he considered ending it. But he knew doing that would ruin everything. So he stayed. A doctor later told him it was all delusion. Wrote him a prescription for antipsychotics. As the pen hit the paper, a spirit appeared. An old woman. Told Vincent to deliver a message to the doctor about a forgotten memory. He did, and the doctor lost it. Then called him later to say it was true, and that he couldn't help him anymore. To this day, Vincent says the message couldn't be more direct. Love and kindness shape far more than we realize. And death, as he now sees it, isn't the end. It's just where the surface story ends, and something far deeper begins. If Bruce's story made you raise your eyebrows, Steve Kang's will have you questioning everything you think you know about life, death, and what comes after. Steve was raised Buddhist. By 6, he was bowing at temples and studying sutras like a kid memorizing cheat codes. By 9, he'd already mapped out his path to nirvana. Not heaven, not a personal god. Just a perfect, detached existence free from suffering. The plan? Meditate for millions of years until you dissolve into nothingness. Sounds peaceful, also exhausting. Then came America. Steve's family moved from South Korea to the States, and the adjustment was brutal. New country, new language, and the racism. It hit hard. His Buddhist routines unraveled. The temples were gone. So were the monks. And slowly, so was his belief that the world made sense. By the time he hit college, things had derailed. The Asian financial crisis wiped out his family's wealth. No tuition money, no backup plan. He ended up crashing in a party house full of drug dealers. The place had the ambiance of a rave, minus the fun. Weed turned into ecstasy, ecstasy into meth. Then came the mixture, which I am not going to say the ingredients to avoid giving anyone ideas. Steve didn't start using it to fill a void, he says, but the depression caught up eventually, and the drugs took over fast. What followed was a 10-day binge. No sleep, no food. Just a decaying mind trapped in a body running on fumes. At one point, he couldn't recognize himself in the mirror. Then came the visions. He started seeing an old Asian man, an Asian grandpa, as he described it. Friendly at first. Comforting even. But the deeper Steve sank, the more twisted the presence became. The grandpa offered him a deal. Sacrifice yourself now and shave off 50,000 years in hell. Steve didn't believe in hell yet, but at that moment it sounded better than the nightmare he was living. 10 days in, no sleep, brain fried, Steve grabbed the biggest kitchen knife he could find. He packed his Buddhist Bible and his wallet, like he was going on a trip, and headed to the living room. With shaking hands and a mind slipping fast, he started cutting. His mother walked in mid-act, screamed, and called 911 in a panic.
Stabbed myself repeatedly, and you saw the scars, and it was painful, but now they're jumping on me. They're macing me, whacking me with the bat, and the grandpa's like, you gotta do faster, faster. So I went for the neck, and I stabbed my neck about 13, 15, 17 times. Blood squirting out. I found out later the artery was cut. And my mom told me after, I woke up from a coma, and the surgery, she said, Steve, the entire living room was covered in blood. There was not one spot that was not covered in.
EMTs rushed him to UCI Medical Center, fighting to keep him alive. On the way, Steve flatlined, and that's when everything changed. He claims his soul left his body. He describes it as an endless plunge. Terror ramped up with every second. Then he hit something. Hell. He doesn't use that word lightly. No fire, no pitchforks. Just a lightless, joyless wasteland. Purple-red cliffs, no grass, no sky, no sound, no comfort. Just endless pain and a thick chain twisted around his gut. He says the shame, fear, and guilt were unbearable. People were there, but no one could speak. Everyone isolated in their own personal torment. And towering above it all were demons 3, 4, or 5 stories tall. That's when Steve says he knew he was a sinner. Not suspected, not assumed, knew. And he knew he belonged there. His Buddhist training hadn't prepared him for this. Now keep in mind, Steve was unconscious in the hospital for 8 hours. But to him, this felt like a concentrated 15 to 20 minutes. And just when he thought it was over, something broke through. Back in the real world, his mother had called an old acquaintance, and she rallied a church prayer team from Grace Ministries. 8 people showed up at the hospital. They laid hands on Steve's body and prayed. For 8 hours. Somewhere in the middle of that, Steve says he heard a voice. It said, "I love you, Steve. No more drugs and no more Buddhism." That voice, he says, was Jesus. Next thing he knew, peace like he'd never felt swept over him. And he opened his eyes. Still in the ER. Still bleeding. But alive.
So shocked that I was still alive. When I came back to Earth, I was like, oh my God, I got another chance. Opened my eyes, and I'm surrounded by the prayer warriors looking at me, and they were a little scared because I attempted suicide. So the first thing the pastor, I remember the female pastor who was spirit-filled, she looks at me in the eye, she goes, "In Jesus' name, devil be gone." And I said, "I'm not the devil, ma'am." And she goes, "Good, I just wanted to make sure." And then she goes, "What did you see?" I tell her what I saw, which is what I shared with you. She goes, "You just saw hell." And I was like, "Yes, I think I did." And I said, "I don't want to go there."
He calls it his rebirth. The prayer team led him in the sinner's prayer. He repeated it 10 times just to be sure. He wasn't taking chances. Recovery wasn't instant. His body was torn up.
After I woke up, and the doctor said, "Steve, it's a miracle you're alive. We actually had to do 2 surgeries on you instead of the original planned 1, because even though we started connecting all the blood vessels, your heart rate, blood pressure kept going down. We thought we were going to lose you. It's a miracle you're alive." So I thanked him.
The same church that prayed for him visited constantly, studied the Bible with him, and never let go. Within weeks, he told them he wanted to become a pastor. Then came part 2. It wasn't all rosy afterwards. Roughly 9 months later, he slipped, relapsed into old habits, parties, drinking, drugs. He was spiraling again. But then he says he got another chance, another near-death experience. This time, it wasn't hell, it was heaven. He says Jesus showed him the New Jerusalem, a golden city, translucent and glowing, a cube 2,000 miles high and wide, streets of gold, angels singing in voices unlike anything human. And in the middle of it all, God the Father, not a person, a blazing sphere of light, like what Paul described in the Bible. Steve heard the Father's voice, deep, layered, like rivers crashing over rocks, and it said, "Jesus is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When Steve came back from that, he came back hard. No more backsliding, no more hesitation. He got clean, fully. 25 years sober, no drinking, no secrets, just one mission, tell people about what he saw. He's a pastor now, an evangelist. He founded Revive the Nations, preaches across the country, tells everyone who'll listen about the hell that was packed and the heaven that wasn't. Says he even prays that people like Kim Jong-il and Hitler find grace, because according to him, no one deserves hell, but everyone's headed there by default. It's easy to write off near-death experiences as fantasy, the brain's last fireworks before shutting down, a dream, a defense mechanism. But once you've heard enough of these stories, you start to feel a tug, a pattern, and not the kind you can chalk up to coincidence or suggestion. So it's either thousands of people across time, culture, and belief systems are hallucinating the same kinds of experiences, or something else is going on. Scientists, researchers, and even skeptical doctors who started out rolling their eyes, many of them now admit something is happening here that doesn't fit neatly into the usual medical script. After Death is a 2023 documentary that poked its head into this weird and sacred space. It's not just a collection of NDE stories, it leans into what might actually be behind them. The director, Stephen Gray, didn't get into this from a place of curiosity. His brother-in-law died in a car crash, and in trying to make sense of that loss, Gray found himself knee-deep in accounts of people who died and come back talking about light, warmth, peace, and reunions that felt more real than anything they'd ever known. But emotional pull isn't the whole story. People want to know, is there any proof? Like actual, testable, logic proof? Researchers like Dr. Jeffrey Long have done extensive work on this. He is an American author and researcher into the phenomenon of near-death experiences. He founded the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation and gathered over 4,000 detailed accounts. He concluded that NDEs are too structured, too consistent, and too impossible to dismiss.
Non-Western near-death experiences. These are in countries where they're not predominantly Judeo-Christian, and they're from just, you name the religious background, I've run into it. And remarkably, these non-Western near-death experiences, the content, what occurs, the elements are strikingly similar to typical Western near-death experiences. And in fact, I've co-authored a scholarly paper with an Iranian near-death experience researcher. He looked at a couple dozen people that had near-death experiences in Iran. Exactly what I'm seeing in my series. No matter where on earth you have your near-death experience, amazingly, it doesn't make any difference, Theo, whether you're, say, a Muslim in Egypt or a Hindu in India, or a Christian in the United States, or no religious belief at all. Wherever on the planet you have your near-death experience, whatever age, the content, what occurs, is going to be strikingly similar.
Dr. Long also noticed that people report full-blown, vivid, meaningful experiences while they're clinically dead. Zero heartbeat, flatlined EEG, no brain activity, yet they're describing conversations happening in the next room. The color of a nurse's shoelaces, the way a doctor folded his arms. One guy recalled the exact wording on a sticker under the hospital gurney. He saw it while floating above his body. That level of specificity? It's either the best hallucination in human history, or consciousness really does step out of the body when things shut down. Which brings us back to cases like Bruce Van Natta. He recalls seeing angels holding his body together, while also observing the entire ER scene from above, and doctors verified details he shouldn't have known. That's the kind of stuff Long uses to build his case. By the way, the complete footage of all the NDE interviews is in the description below, and I implore you to watch. Now, Dr. Long isn't alone. Dr. Michael Sabom started as a hardcore skeptic too. He's a cardiologist who thought all this was just wishful thinking, until he started listening. What got him wasn't just the stories themselves, it was how accurate they were. People who'd flatlined were describing surgical procedures step by step, in real time. He eventually admitted the idea that consciousness could detach from the brain might not be so far-fetched. Sabom calls this the edge where science and religion meet. And to be honest, that's where this whole subject lives. Not in dogma, not in blind faith, but in that uncomfortable zone where the data starts poking holes in everything we thought we knew about the mind and the body. You could ignore one story, you could even ignore 5, but thousands. And across the board, they report eerily similar things. Tunnels, lights, life reviews, peace, and encounters with someone or something that feels familiar and all-knowing. Steve Kang saw a light, he said, understood him. Peggy Robinson felt like time collapsed. Brian Melvin described a loving presence that rewound his entire life like a movie, but through someone else's perspective. These aren't just dreams, they're structured emotional experiences that change people forever. Dr. Bruce Grayson is the godfather of NDE research. He started investigating this stuff back in the 70s. He worked at the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies, one of the few academic groups openly researching consciousness outside the brain. Grayson didn't just collect stories, he built tools. He created the NDE scale, which is a standardized test to figure out whether an experience qualifies as a real NDE. It covers everything from cognitive changes to emotional after effects. He's used this to analyze over 1,000 cases and found something odd. These memories don't fade. People remember their NDEs with crystal clarity even 20 years later. Try doing that with a dream or even your wedding day. He also found that up to 20% of people who go into cardiac arrest have NDEs. That's not just a handful of people. It's millions of people worldwide. And what's even more wild, these people often come back totally changed. Like, personality rewrite changed. Less afraid of death, less materialistic, more compassionate. Some even shift careers. Melvin became deeply spiritual. Tolman too. They all return with this uncanny calmness, like death showed them something we haven't quite grasped yet. And it's not just bliss and angels. Grayson's research includes unpleasant NDEs too, about 1 to 5% of cases. Usually the person resists the experience. But when they let go, even the terrifying ones flip into something peaceful. American philosopher Raymond Moody is the one who coined the term near-death experience in the first place. A psychiatrist who started interviewing people way back in the 1970s and couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was going on. Moody studied 150 cases for his book Life After Life, and even though none of the NDEs were identical, they kept circling the same elements: the light, the tunnel, the review, and the overwhelming feeling of peace. He later expanded his research into shared death experiences, where people at the bedside of a dying loved one report similar phenomena. Floating sensations, glimpses of another world, music, time slowing down. The whole thing is bizarre, unless it's real. Even Swiss-American psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross backed him. She said Moody's work confirmed what we've been taught for 2,000 years, that death isn't the end. Grayson did a study of cardiac arrest survivors. Nearly 16% of them had NDEs. In another study at UVA Hospital, 10% of cardiac patients reported them too. That's not nothing. That's 1 in 10. And these aren't vague stories. We're talking about people seeing dead relatives they didn't even know had passed, then waking up and finding out the relative had died while they were unconscious. Try explaining that one with neurotransmitters. And when people come back, they often report a shift in values. They stop chasing things that don't matter. Material stuff, petty fights, and ego, all of it fades. It's as if they've seen behind the curtain, and now the stage props just look like props. Bruce Van Natta didn't just survive. He became a man who talked about faith and healing. Steve Kang turned deeply spiritual. Vincent Tolman started helping others find purpose. They're not just survivors, they're transformed. And look, I'm not here to insult your faith or anyone's faith. But when the clinically dead report accurate, verifiable details, when people come back from death with memories sharper than real life and personalities flipped inside out, you gotta ask, is this all just chemicals? Or is consciousness bigger than we thought? Let's not forget that mainstream neuroscience still can't explain why we're even aware. We can't replicate consciousness. We can't locate it. And here we have doctors, cardiologists, oncologists, psychiatrists, basically saying, yeah, it might not come from the brain at all. Dr. Sam Parnia is a pulmonary and critical care specialist with a long list of peer-reviewed studies. His argument is razor sharp. If the brain shuts down entirely within 20 seconds of the heart stopping and EEGs confirm that flatline, then how are people like Steve Kang or Brian Melvin having crystal clear experiences while they're technically dead? That shouldn't happen. By all accounts, they should remember nothing. Blank slate. Yet they come back talking about intense encounters, light, sound, conversations, and sometimes even seeing doctors working on them. And that's not just anecdotal fluff. Parnia actually tested it. He and a team launched the AWARE study, a multi-center observational effort across hospitals in the US, UK, and Austria. Out of over 2,000 cardiac arrest cases, 101 survivors were interviewed. 55 said they had some memory from the period when they were clinically dead. 9 described classic NDEs, and 2 even had verifiable perceptions. One 57-year-old man correctly recalled specific sounds and actions that occurred during his resuscitation, even pointing out a doctor who wasn't standing close by but played a key role. No pulse, no EEG, still awareness. That's what makes Parnia say we shouldn't even call them near-death experiences. In his words, these are actual death experiences. Dr. Peter Fenwick, a British neuropsychiatrist, has been studying NDEs since the 80s. He and his wife, Elizabeth, gathered over 300 first-hand accounts for their book, The Truth in the Light. His conclusion? Consciousness doesn't neatly turn off when the brain does. It sort of loosens, detaches, hangs on for a bit even after everything else says game over. What he's describing brushes up pretty close to what Brian Melvin called his tour of the afterlife. Dr. Pim van Lommel, over in the Netherlands, was the first to run a prospective study on NDEs. No cherry-picking, just clean data from every single cardiac arrest patient treated in 10 hospitals across 4 years. Out of 344 patients, 62 reported NDEs. That's nearly 1 in 5. And get this, Van Lommel dug through all the possible explanations: oxygen deprivation, drugs, fear of death, religious beliefs, level of education, and none of them correlated with whether someone had an NDE. Nothing explained it. The people who flatlined for 2 minutes had just as much chance of having a vivid experience as those who were out for 8. Some were religious, others weren't. Some had heard of NDEs before, others hadn't. And in one of the most famous cases from his study, a patient in a coma later described accurately a nurse taking his dentures out and putting them in a specific drawer in a crash cart. He was out cold. He should have had 0 sensory input. But he knew. That kind of detail echoes Bruce Van Natta's experience seeing his own body from above while angels held his guts inside him. It's the same theme over and over, lucid perception without a functioning brain. If you're thinking, okay, but what if these people are just more prone to fantasy or hallucination? Kenneth Ring, a psychologist who's been researching NDEs since the 70s, looked into that too. He actually built a scoring system to measure how deep an experience was, the Weighted Core Experience Index. It tracks things like out-of-body awareness, peace, life review, and meeting entities or deceased people. It's not perfect, but it gives structure to the stories. What Ring found was that a lot of people who've had NDEs, especially those involving trauma or abuse earlier in life, might have been more absorption-prone. Basically, they score higher on traits like daydreaming and emotional immersion. But rather than discrediting their stories, this might help explain why certain individuals seem tuned in when their brain shuts off. He believes it's not a weakness, it might actually be a clue. Ring saw the same thing Parnia and Van Lommel did. People changed. They came back less scared, more loving, and more purposeful. He even built the life changes inventory to track that shift. It wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern. So when people like Steve Kang or Peggy Robinson come back from death describing places, feelings, and visions that shouldn't be possible, and then spend years transformed by those few minutes, it's not just inspiring. It's suspiciously consistent. You start wondering if maybe what we call dying is just a lousy word for whatever this thing actually is. Something that science is just starting to poke at with the right kind of questions. When you start poking around near-death experiences, out-of-body moments, and the whole afterlife idea, you're gonna hit a wall. A big, solid, academic wall. Because for a lot of scientists, the brain is the story. No brain, no mind, period. These academic experts believe it's all about brainwaves. One of the go-to experts for this more grounded explanation is Dr. Kevin Nelson. He says near-death experiences, no matter how intense, cosmic, or reality-shattering they feel, can all be filed under regular brain activity. His point is that for you to even remember an NDE, your brain has to be online, storing and retrieving like a good little hard drive. Nelson leans hard on REM consciousness. Apparently, people with narcolepsy report OBEs all the time, especially during sleep paralysis. Then you've got folks like Ernst Roden and Susan Blackmore doubling down on the physiology. They say when your brain's starving for oxygen, it basically starts to lose the plot. Cue the hallucinations. Bright tunnels, booming voices, life reviews, all possibly just a disoriented brain on the brink. Blackmore argues that all those dazzling lights and floaty moments could be visual cortex misfires, not spiritual revelations. Just disinhibited neurons throwing a light show. And if you've ever taken ketamine, she says, you've probably had something eerily similar to an OBE. Doesn't mean you left your body. It just means your brain played a trick on you, and maybe it was a good one. I'll be real. Part of me believes, yeah, maybe the brain can do that. But then again, just because something can be explained doesn't mean that's all there is to it, right? But more researchers like Olaf Blanke and Sebastian Dieguez continue to disagree. Their thing is multisensory integration, basically how your brain stitches together what your body feels, sees, and hears. And when that process breaks down, especially in a part of the brain called the right temporoparietal cortex, it can throw your internal GPS completely off. Suddenly, you're not in your body anymore, or at least it feels that way. According to them, it's not your soul floating around, it's just a glitch. A system error, not a spiritual awakening. They argue NDEs are a mashup of different brain glitches, depending on which region gets messed with. No single cause, no magical key. Just a grab bag of failures that feel incredibly real. And then we shift into the psychological zone. Back in the day, two psychiatrists, Russell Noyes and Roy Cletty, had a theory. Maybe NDEs are just the brain's last-ditch attempt to keep you sane during a life-threatening crisis. Like a panic button labeled Detach Now. They linked it to depersonalization, a kind of emotional emergency shutdown where you feel removed from your body. Peter Crawford says anecdotal NDE stories, no matter how heart-wrenching or vivid, don't count as scientific proof. And the veridical perception stuff, like the famous Pam Reynolds case, where a woman supposedly described surgical details while brain dead? Crawford says nah, either she heard it before she flatlined, or already knew some things going in. Crawford points to the null results from big studies like AWARE. Hospitals placed hidden targets in operating rooms. Hundreds of patients later. 0 verified observations. Not one. For 4 years. He also brings up false negatives. Times when someone supposedly had an NDE, but their reported perceptions were flat out wrong or weirdly fantastical. Stuff that can't be verified or directly contradicts the setting they were in. Dr. Alex Lickerman echoes the idea that NDEs, while emotionally real, are often just misread. He compares them to optical illusions. Your eyes see it, your brain believes it, but that doesn't make it literal truth. Science, he says, doesn't care how powerful something feels, it wants evidence. Controlled, repeatable, boring evidence. Still, I've followed the reasoning. I get the framework. But part of me still wonders if we're trying to map the soul with a microscope. Maybe there are things the brain can't measure. At least, not yet. Why do so many people see similar things, feel the same overwhelming peace, and meet the same figures? Maybe we're just not asking the right questions. And while the science does offer an answer, I don't think it is the right answer. In this video, I would have to say, NDEs are as real as it gets. These people know they experienced something that made them make a conscious effort to be the best version of themselves. I don't think anyone has ever had a hallucination that made them do a complete 360 on their life. And if what these survivors are saying is right, that means we are really on borrowed time and everything we've been told has been a lie, while everything we've forsaken has always been the truth. Links to add in description.